welcome back to the NFT Talks podcast. And today, as always, I have amazing guests. And today's guest is someone that has been, I would say, considered an influential person within the space, doing a lot of things, wearing many hats. He's the founder of Cash Labs. He's bringing Web3 projects to the market. And he's also working with Decentraland, so it's the Metaverse meets everything else. And he's also worked with a lot of people that I've had on the podcast, which we'll talk about. Welcome, David. How are you doing?
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm doing great. Living life and loving it. Trying to push the metaverse forwards. Another day in the life.
Where are you based, David?
I'm here in right now sunny Toronto, Canada. The weather's a little bit mixed here, but I am wherever the world takes me. I've been kind of all over the place this past year, but doing a lot of building right now. So happy to be home for a little bit over a month at once, which is awesome.
Okay, so you've been very involved in a lot of things that's going on within the Web3 space, metaverse wise. Like, how have you found it? It's been very fast paced. Like, how have you been dealing with everything that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's insanely fast-paced. I mean, I've worked in the entertainment industry for almost my entire life. I was a child actor. I ran a production company for 7 years, and this is the entertainment industry on absolute crack in terms of pace.
Yeah.
I mean, I always like to say that it's like the entertainment industry and the tech industry had a baby, and somebody like hopped it up on speed, and that's that's Web3. But it's been really exciting. I mean, it's been constant exponential growth, a lot of opportunity, and just trying to figure out how to keep up with it all. I know that's been something that a lot of people have felt, they kind of like put themselves in a position, and then all of a sudden they have a bunch of stuff coming at them. And it's really, how can you, how long can you drink from the fire hose? And then also, how can you make that sustainable? So I feel like a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past year, it's like, for instance, like you mentioned Cash Labs, that's my company. So there's me and then there's Cash Labs, I always say. Cash Labs started as just me. Because I needed some way to, rationalize and consolidate the money I was making within the Web3 space, mostly crypto. And now we have over 45 people working with us. I think we're in very heavy hiring stage. We should have 60 soon. It's just a really big kind of network now of people really kind of pushing the decentralized ethos. Everybody's a sovereign being. Everybody works for themselves. Everybody has control over their hours, their pay, basically, depending on how many accounts they want to work. But yeah, I mean, what we've tried to do is solve problems. I think that the biggest thing that, anybody in a creative sphere can do is choose the problems they want to solve and then do that well. And we really enjoy solving problems with Web3 solutions. So I love Web3. I wrote a thesis on NFTs and DeFi. I'm a huge nerd in this space. And I have a big production and entertainment industry background. So those things combined really kind of allow me to put on a lot of these big things, especially like metaverse events. Things like that are very much in my comfort zone and things that I really enjoy to do. So we keep kind of throwing out new events as often as possible. We just had Metaverse Fashion Week. We have Metaverse Pride happening right now in Decentraland. Metaverse Art Week's coming up in August. Lots of things going on. So
I love it. I want to kind of bring it back a minute. And I think a lot of people I think it's a lot of things going on in the space, a lot of money or cryptocurrency floating around, and everyone's like, wow, need to get involved. You mentioned right away, look, I needed a way to kind of put my money somewhere within the business. So how did you get to that point, first of all, to converting your skills to being able to people seeing the value in what you were doing to get paid within this space? I think that's interesting.
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think one thing that's worth mentioning with my specific circumstance is that I ran a production company before doing what I do now. So I still do produce sometimes events and, drops and things like that. So I do come from a campaigning background, advertising background. I've worked on Netflix shows. I've worked with like brands like OVO before any of this Web3 stuff, music videos, commercials. We've like art directed or production designed like entire commercials for like major national brands. I've done a lot of work before all of this. So I had a bunch of background pre NFTs. Also, I was, as a kid, I was like really into Bitcoin. So in 2014, I had like an anonymous Twitter profile and I was like on Tor, and like, I had bought Bitcoin, mainly to buy weed at the time, but now that's done well for me. But I think that's background, but in terms of like the what I guess turned over in my life, which allowed me to like get into this space financially, I guess, as a career, I was pandemic happened. I couldn't do any of the things that I was doing before in terms of production. Events weren't happening. No sets were. I tried doing one set during COVID in my previous job, and basically we had 100-person team, and only 5 people were allowed in the building at a time. So it was like basically like what should have been a half-day shoot took us a week, and it was one of the most painstaking processes ever. So I'm like, I can't do this. So I ended up going back to school. And I ended up writing a master's thesis about NFTs and DeFi because I was interested in NFTs. This is like 2020. I was interested in NFTs beforehand, and I wanted to see what they were doing. I was hearing some conversations, early days of Clubhouse about, people considering use cases. And I remember I heard one conversation around, it was a bunch of like people it was like early days of Clubhouse when there were a bunch of like really important people on Clubhouse. You're like, why are you on this app? But it was like a bunch of directors of brands in Europe. And I was in Europe, and I was like, oh shoot, like somebody from Marc Jacobs, somebody from Ferragamo, somebody from like Gucci. And they were all talking about, NFTs and how they have a use case for fashion. And it just kind of clicked for me. And then I started writing about it because I started writing my thesis. And then I released my thesis at like the very beginning, like very end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when everybody was asking a lot of questions. And I released it for free. So I like put it out on the internet, and a whole bunch of people read it. At first it was like 20,000 people read it, but now I think like well over 100,000 people have read it. But at that time, I was one of the only people like giving informational resources in text form about NFTs. Not the only one, but one of the only ones. So that got me a bunch of attention. And the first jobs that I got, properly in NFT space, in true NFT fashion, similar to Vitalik and everybody else, people asked me to write about NFTs and what's going on. So I had, lovely people from Outlier Ventures were one of the first big ones who reached out to me. And they asked me to start writing for a little publication they started called NFTs.WTF. And I started writing for them, and they would pay me, in crypto to write about NFTs. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I kept doing that. And soon enough, people were asking me to do more content, because I have a content background. I was doing video content for people like Unit London. I helped them kind of start some of their community building efforts. And all throughout this time, maybe I'm jumping ahead to a bit, but all throughout this time, I was still on Clubhouse. So I feel like Clubhouse also got me a ton of opportunities because it was this decentralized network. Even though it was a Web2 platform, it allowed me to interface with so many other people who were doing similar things. So I met so many people and so many business people through Clubhouse. And that's kind of what kicked me off, I guess, the writing, and then Clubhouse and being kind of a community leader within NFTs.tips and other communities.
Yeah, I was going to say that NFT.tips, and like, shout out to Clubhouse, man. That's where where my first introduction of people, a community speaking about NFTs, you can tap into daily. That there'll be interesting conversation. Then you'll get the odd. It was weird, wasn't it? You'll get the odd celebrity, and like you said, creative director just dropping in. You're like, this is crazy. But I thought maybe it's just Clubhouse, but maybe it was just the conversation. That's where all the conversation was going on. Because
I remember the early days of Clubhouse where I'd be in a conversation with 14 people, and Drake Bell was one of those people. And then he followed me on Instagram. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Yeah, like what is this? He was, and all kinds of people, like Paris Hilton, Don Diablo. I mean, I'm friends with Don now. Like we've done some stuff together. I mean, it's Deadmau5 was in a bunch of those rooms. Like literally Banksy apparently was in some of those rooms, like low key. Like it was a wild time. It was interesting. That was the Wild West. That's when it really felt like the Wild West.
And I feel that I think that once again that was the first, but I first experienced the whole community side of it, where especially when there's products dropping, everybody would go into Clubhouse and then everyone would have it at their profile.
Yeah, and I mean that was the most effective. That was the most effective time where the community was really in one place. I think like that was the most centralized our community has ever been. I do also think that there was a really big period of growth throughout 2021, and Clubhouse, which then kind of now shifted to Twitter Spaces, but Clubhouse was a really big cause of that, I think. And I was one of the kind of like admins of NFTs.tips for quite a while, and I ran a lot of rooms for a long time. And I really will say that us growing that community from like zero, and like a bunch of people were involved with that, like Alex Glassy, Eric, everybody. But we went from zero to like, I don't know, like 60,000 people on an app that previously had like no user base, apart from, very niche invite only. And there were other communities that built, but also considering that like that was in a time where nobody knew about NFTs. There may be like 10 or 20,000 people who like knew about NFTs. And we built up over the course of that year, 60,000 people who were learning about NFTs. That was a really big deal at the time. And I think that definitely, that, like I said, that put me in front of a lot of people. That's initially how we got, even connected to Outlier Ventures. That's how we got connected to a bunch of people. And then, this space is very serendipitous. You meet one person, they introduce you to another person, they introduce you to another person. I met Krista Kim, who's a very dear friend of mine and somebody I work with a lot. And I met her through the work I did with Unit London, because one of the first jobs I got in the space like properly was with Unit London and helping them launch their platform, and I was doing video content with them, and I interviewed Krista, and at the end of the interview we both really enjoyed each other's company, and we said, where are you based? She said, Toronto. I said, me too, I just got back from Italy like 3 days ago. And so we got lunch, and then we've been friends ever since.
That's bizarre. So I was going to sort of cut you there. That's bizarre. Like, because where you've explained that, I've seen all that happen, because I remember me going to Unit London to see Krista's work, and taking a picture to say, look, you work here, I could see it, and so on. And then the fact that you met because you're working with these guys, and I've seen the name.
It's all very serendipitous. And then I got so many opportunities through Krista, and then she introduced me to another person who'd get me so many opportunities. Like, the space is very serendipitous, and it's very like given, if that makes sense. Like, if you help people, like if you are generally like genuinely giving and like also doing what you're best at, like I genuinely enjoy doing a lot of the things that I do, and I'm quite good at some of the specific things that I do. But I try to be honest with myself as possible. You know, if somebody asks me to do something I can't do, I don't say yes to it. So I think that's also how I've been able to kind of like push forwards in the space, because I don't know, I have my own version of the little, like, I think Warren Buffett has some quote where it's like, he doesn't take leaps, he takes like steps over like very achievable, you know, mountains. I'm like, I don't necessarily take steps. Everything in this space is a risk. But I definitely have like calculated risks that I know how to take. Like, I know how to do, you know, communications or PR, or I know how to do community building. I know how to write. I know how to do video content. You know, there's things that I know how to do. I know how to do strategy. Like, that's my favorite thing. But you know, I feel like a lot of people in this space, and this goes back to one of the first things that I said, I feel like a lot of people in this space will overextend, because, you know, it is very aspirational and super cool. And anybody can do all of these things. Like, all of these things are things you can learn on the internet. You know, you can figure out yourself. It might take time and effort and experience, but you can learn how to do coding, you know, 3D work, whatever. You know, you can learn it on your own, but you can't do it all. And you can't do it all if you're coming from scratch. So I feel like a lot of people have to be, you know, realistic with themselves. A lot of people starting their own NFT projects and banging their heads against the wall. Why isn't it working? I'm like, well, you've never done, you know, artwork before. You've never done marketing before. You've never done, you know, like all of the things involved in launching a project. Like, they've never done them before. And it's like, so don't be hard on yourself. This is your first time doing it. It's a great experience. And you kind of go from there. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, I think that what I set myself up for is that, you know, I come from a production background. I come from a content production background. And ultimately, most of what I've done in this space is content production, UI, UX, you know, brand rollouts. It's things that I'm very comfortable in, but it's also integrating those things with Web3, which is now the world that I think I very much live in. I don't do anything really outside of this world anymore. So okay. It's my life now.
Great question to you then, and I'm not sure if he was involved or not. Maybe you can tell a bit more, but I really found in the early stages, and we're keeping on the Clubhouse side of it, when celebrities were getting involved and dropping NFTs. One thing I did see, and I pointed out, and I use an example, is Floyd Mayweather when he dropped his NFT. Now, it didn't go as well, I would say, as any other these celebrity drops. I mean, I don't know if he was involved.
Luckily,
that's safe. It is safe to talk about it. It's okay. So I mean, which I'm assuming you was there, was around when that happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was in and around. I don't know if I was in the room, but yeah.
Okay, so like, what do you think celebrities are doing wrong? Because I mean, they've got the audience, they've got the massive audience. People know who they are. They've got the brand behind the personal brand. Why are they failing? Because there are people that will come into space and they won't do well. So where's the disconnect? What are they not doing right based on your knowledge?
I think there's a lot of good examples of celebrities entering the space. There's a lot of bad examples of celebrities entering the space. I've gotten the chance to work with a bunch of people coming in. And from my perspective, it really just comes down to their knowledge and their involvement. I think a lot of people will want to do, you know, enter the NFT space by proxy because they see it as lucrative. So they'll have a manager or they'll have someone on their behalf kind of launch a project. And I've seen a lot of these. I've worked with some of these types of situations. And even if it goes well financially, it's never ultimately successful because they don't personally have any kind of, you know, stake in the game. I'm not saying that celebrities can't have people on their team helping them launch because, you know, like Snoop Dogg is not going to do the entire sandbox drop on his own. He's not going to dev it out. But, you know, I think that it's important for them to at least be involved in the process and be in touch in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just on a monthly meeting. But I will say that from my experience, and I don't want to name too many names because I don't want this to go on like TMZ or something. But a lot of celebrities that I've worked with are very out of touch with the process of building these NFTs that they launch. And I think that that's usually the main issue, is that it'll be a total concept come up with by a creative team. They'll just say, cool, do it. And then they'll execute it. And there's no touch point that actually is theirs. there's no genuine connection with them in the community. And then when it launches, they don't feel any connection to it. So they don't feel inclined to go in the Discord, say anything about it, talk to people about it, because they didn't make it. They had no part in the ideation process and they have no connection to it. So I think that one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of marketing people are doing in this space is they're pushing things to go fast, fast, fast. We want to do it now. When what people really want are authentic experiences. And you know what? People, like you said, a lot of celebrities have crazy engaged audiences who I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Who can I? Yeah. A lot of these people have, they have fans who fucking love them. They love them. And if they actually had an authentic interaction with them, whether that's on a live stream, whether that's on some Instagram posts, whether that's on, Twitter Spaces, if they actually took some time to have some, and we've seen people do this successfully. Deadmau5, Steve Aoki, Paris Hilton, Mark Cuban, like so many people who've actually, Gary Vaynerchuk, who just like take the time, sit with the community, like, okay, what do you want? How can I work with you? Like, let's do this together. And even if it's not 100% genuine, it comes off as genuine. And those are the projects that succeed from my perspective, are the people who actually take the time to, maybe buy a few NFTs themselves, that delve in themselves before they fully take the dive and launch a project. I think that, just to shout out somebody who I've talked to recently, who I think has done a great job, Niccolo Formichetti, to use the, semi-proper pronunciation of his name, Lady Gaga's creative director. I've had some chats with him lately, and he's been, like, in his words, like a student the past year, trying to figure out all of this stuff, what virtual fashion is, what the metaverse is, what NFTs are. And I really think, especially considering that from my perspective, these really are long-term, technologies that we're going to be working with. So I think it's advantageous for celebrities. Pay somebody to do it for you. You have money. You don't need to do it yourself. Pay somebody to teach you about these things and learn and try to figure it out. Ask your financial advisor. Does your kid have any NFTs? Can he teach me how to buy some NFTs? I think it makes sense if you want to come into this space. A lot of people come, even if you're coming in with a financial perspective in mind, even if you think, oh, this is a good business opportunity. It is a good business opportunity, but you have to come in with the right intentions. If you want to make money in the space, okay, well, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do for the people? It's a service business at the end of the day. What are you going to do for the people who are buying your shit? Like, point blank, period. Like, what are you going to do for them? What value are they going to get out of it? Oh, you're going to give them a cartoon skunk? That's not good enough. Like, what is that cartoon skunk going to do for them? Is it going to be a piece of Banksy artwork? Cool. You can sell those as just a cartoon skunk. But if it's not, you have to really consider what that's going to do for people. Is it an access token? Is it a ticket? What is the community? Why does the community exist? Yes, there are communities that are purposely non-utility. Like, I love the MFers and how that they have this whole thing that, like, like, we have no utility. It's just a cartoon stick figure. It's funny, but that's droll. That's purposely tongue in cheek. Like, generally speaking, if you're a new person entering, also that's coming from like veterans in the space. If you're a new person in the space and you don't have a following, you're coming in for the first time, you have to, kind of do the work.
Yeah, and the thing,
and that includes celebrities. It's not just like, Joe Schmo in Nebraska. That's also like, if I don't know, Angelina Jolie wants to launch an NFT, she can't just launch an NFT because she's Angelina Jolie. She can, and it might sell, but it might not.
Yeah, and it may sell, but it may not hold on value after it's sold, which is another thing we see a lot of projects.
Right.
Yeah,
and then people get pissed. They buy it, and then 2 months later, they're like, "Well, what the hell did I buy it for?"
So I want to ask you a question then. I know that there's a lot of, and I know we'll just keep it because we're talking about celebrities at the moment. I know that a lot of celebrities being approached by agencies, and they are being offered upfronts payments to kind of take their IP and for these agencies to do what they want with initially, which can be, I think it's bizarre that people are taking payments, whether it's £1 million or $1 million. How much is your brand worth that you've built up over these years? So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, look, what? I think the reason that exists is because, and again, I'll try not to name names, but from my perspective, celebrities have been asking for that, especially celebrities from the music industry, because it's what they're accustomed to. Most musicians, unfortunately, are used to the traditional record system, and they're used to getting paid out in order to have the rights to something. It started, I think, from the musicians and from the artists asking for that, coming to platforms like Rarible, OpenSea, and Super Rare, and saying, "Hey, will you give me an advance of $500,000?" And they all said no, because that makes no sense for the platform, because the platform's only going to make a small percentage on it. But they don't understand that. They look at it as a huge marketing thing because, I'm this person. I think that what we're seeing now is kind of the result of, okay, the marketplaces aren't saying yes. So agencies or new marketplaces, new people who are trying to make like major marketing stakes in the game are the people who are picking up on these kinds of offers and who are, in turn making offers to other celebrities. Maybe they had some negotiations with somebody and they didn't work out. Those are the people who are, going and reaching out to people and being like, hey, you want $500,000, you want $300,000 to do an NFT drop. But let me tell you, everybody in the game a year ago was asking. I can tell you, I'm really trying not to name names. There's a lot of people would know, but everybody was asking straight up for money. Like, hey, will you give me 300 grand? Will you give me, but this person got 300 grand. I want 300 grand. Like that was almost every backroom conversation last year in terms of like celebrities entering the space. It was a cash grab. And now I hope to see less of that. I'm already starting to see a little bit less of that, which is cool.
Let's talk Cash Labs then. Successful, I would consider successful drops working with celebrities. So one, I was there within the clubhouse. I seen you work with Coke Boys, French Montana, the digital wearables of the sneakers. I thought that was really interesting. And the thing is, it makes us, like I said, at that point, I didn't know you was there because of Cash Labs. So I was a bit like, who's this guy at this point, and why is he involved at that point? I wasn't sure, but obviously I looked into you after and it made sense. But yeah, I consider that's a successful drop. I know I'm connected with Cam. He's very passionate about continuing and doing more within the NFT space. So tell me how that came about and how you guys worked.
So, I mean, it's actually quite funny because I initially met Cam through Krista. Actually, she was talking to him. So it's funny how things come about. One thing leads to another. I think that drop went really well. I think it was, a really great learning experience for everybody involved. I think it was one of the earlier celebrity drops. And I think it was one of the earlier celebrity drops that actually had, added value components. Like we had an AR filter, we had a metaverse wearable component, we had all these things. And I was really proud of, pulling that off. I personally did a majority of, the production and ideation and everything for that drop. So it was a lot of work. I mean, it was apparently, according to Rarible, one of the top 10 drops ever on Rarible. It sold quite well. But, it was also a great learning experience. And I think that, it was also in the earlier days of my business. It was pretty much just like me, my assistant, and a very small team. I had like a graphic designer and maybe like one web person and maybe one video editor, and that was it. And it was a really big learning experience of how much work goes into a large scale NFT drop. I had done some other things before that, but most of them were one-of-ones, which market completely differently. That's very, one-on-one marketing. But, it was a great learning experience. And I think that, the community that we built out of that was very helpful. I ended up leaving after the initial project was done just because we finished our initial scope and we were just so super busy. And I kind of passed it off to Cam and his team. And I think that, they're continuing on the legacy, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, I very much see it as one of the kind of major stepping stones within my career. I definitely, now I'm happy I can say that it's definitely not the biggest thing I've done anymore, but for a period of time that and like the project I did with the NBA, also with Krista last year, those two projects were like two of the really big marquee projects that like pushed me into a lot of the things that I'm doing now. And also it allowed a lot of people to trust me because I was responsible for the production side of that, even though that's not a majority of what I do now. Now we also focus on the go-to-market. I'd say there were two major learnings for me. One is that, I can produce great content. I know that I can, like the AR filters and everything, it all worked. Even though like apparently making a shoe AR filter is next to impossible. The AR people told me, but we just kept pushing them forwards. And also, it gave me a lot of confidence in terms of my ability to sell NFTs. I was up on Clubhouse, some days like, 10 hours a day, selling these NFTs and sharing information about the project. It taught me a lot about the power of live audio, which I've definitely leveraged into all of the projects that I've worked on, pretty much all of the projects I've worked on since. And it taught me a lot about the power of like the NFT community and, being like legitimate and authentic. And, ultimately, you can do as many celebrity partnerships as you want on a project. It's the people who are going to buy it. So if you don't go to the people and if you don't interact with the people, nobody's going to buy your shit. So I think it was a really great learning. I think historically a success. So
okay, I love that. So we're talking, obviously, a lot of these projects we're talking about digital fashion, which I think is or virtual fashion, we're going to call it, which I think is going to be massive, and it's already on its way. And integrating that into the metaverse. Obviously, you're also involved with Decentraland Fashion Week. So tell me a bit about how did that? What was the reason for that? And what was the outcome of it? I mean, you can start from there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been interested in fashion for a long time, even back when I was doing work previously through my production company. You know, we loved working with designers. We worked with a lot of fashion designers. We did a bunch of like New York Fashion Weeks, etc. The school I went to and did my master's at is they do a lot of fashion programming. A lot of my classes were fashion related. And actually, one of my final projects as well for my master's, I also did a magazine, and we focused very much on virtual fashion. And we actually, it's funny because we worked with a lot of people who now are people that are very much in my network who I work with very often, but we worked with some designers from the Fabricant. And, you know, these were some of the early days, like this is 2020, 2021, right? So they were some of the only people really on the scene. You know, we were reaching out to DressX and people like that who now I work very closely with. But anyway, fast forward a little while later, you know, I did the Coke Boys drop. I was working with some virtual fashion companies like the Fabricant, you know, on some content and things like that. I did a IRL event with the Fabricant, you know, a year or two ago, and you know, things were moving forwards. Virtual, it's funny. Metaverse Fashion Week actually started essentially as just like a conversation. Sam Hamilton, the creative director of Decentraland, was you know, thinking about doing a fashion event. He wanted to do a fashion week of some kind, and I had breakfast with him and Gigi Casemiro, their event producer, in Miami at Art Basel in December of 2021. So like months before it happened, like not that many months, but months before it happened. And, you know, we had a conversation, you know, just generally because we'd had a chance to work together on some previous projects like the Coke Boys project. They liked working with me. I liked working with them. And we were thinking about what we could do together. And they mentioned this fashion week idea. And I just started, you know, spewing ideas as I do, because I have a million friends who are virtual fashion designers. And I'm like, well, I have a list of like at least 20 people we could immediately, you know, put together and put this together with. And then I'm sure we could also get some big brands. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. Do you want to work together on it? And I'm like, sure. And then they're like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I guess I could curate it because I have all these brands. And they're like, okay, you're the curator of Metaverse Fashion Week. I'm like, okay, fabulous. So that conversation happened. I was kind of like, okay, well, what do I do now? I started having a lot of conversations, like probably like over like 100 or 200 Zoom calls, I would say, like over the next few months, with various designers, you know, folks in the space, brands, etc. And, you know, we started to build out like what the programming was going to look like. Decentraland really kindly offered to create a gallery space for me. And it's so as part of, like, as my payment for doing this, they gave me 6 plots of land in the Crypto Valley district and built me this beautiful gallery space, which is now the Cash Labs Gallery. And I put on a show in there of over 20 designers specifically in there. And then I also helped throughout the whole process, you know, working with a lot of the brands, helping them through their process. Some of them we produced their shows directly via Cash Labs. Some of them we just advised and helped kind of like, you know, put together the vision of it. I was involved in a lot of the planning calls throughout the entire process. There was a lot of work done. I can't take full credit though, because the Decentraland team did so much work. Shibu and the devs and all the 3D artists of Decentraland are absolutely incredible. UNXD as well. They put a lot of work into this. Boson Protocol put a lot of work into this. And I think what this all resulted in was just a really incredible event. With so many different levels, because so many people were working on it on a bunch of different levels. We had fully realized retail experiences. We had full runway shows. We had fully realized gallery experiences. We had a whole series of panel talks, which I hosted. There was photography. There was, you know, videos. There was art. Like it was very much fashion presented in all of its different formats. We could not have anticipated the reaction. You know, we were looking up like how many people typically come to a show at like a traditional fashion week, and we're looking like, okay, 20 to 40,000. So we're like, okay, if 20 to 40,000 people come to all the shows, that we would consider a success. And you know, over 108,000 unique people came into Decentraland to see the shows over 4 days. But then the crazier part is that once we released this all to the media and we shared videos and photos, over 1.2 billion unique people and over 7 billion, over 1.2 billion unique people saw this event. And overall, it garnered over 7 billion impressions, which is similar to like a Lady Gaga like album drop or something like that. Wow. So it was absolutely insane. It was not at all what we expected. And I think what it resulted in is a lot of brands starting to internally ask the question, you know, what can we do? I think it was funny because we got a bunch of pre-press, like pre-production press before the event went live. And even like a week or two before, there were brands reaching out, wanting to do stuff. And I think within the last month of Fashion Week, actually one of the biggest activations of Fashion Week, Estee Lauder reached out to me directly. And I actually ended up producing their event there. And their activation had over 900 million impressions, like their activation alone. And, you know, it was on top of everything else, you know, but it was a huge success. And it's really interesting how brands that chose to loop into this framework, people like Tommy Hilfiger or Philip Plain, are now, even months later, already considered like the visionaries of the traditional brands entering the Web3 space. So I think it was a huge opportunity for a lot of people. And now also we're seeing a ton of people respond. So I think Fashion Week next year, we're actually going to start planning it already in a few months, because Fashion Week next year is going to be absolutely next level. And also, last thing I want to say, because I'm talking a lot, but Metaverse, we really want to start taking the idea of Metaverse Fashion Week more seriously. So next year, what we really, really want to see, and maybe this is something you want to touch on further, but I really want to push the interoperability potential of Decentraland and see experiences in all metaverses next year for Metaverse Fashion Week. We saw some this year. I pushed them in my gallery. There were some, links to metahuman experiences and things that weren't possible in Decentraland, spatial galleries. But next year, I really want to see this taken to another level. So that's what I'll say about that.
Okay, that's interesting. You know what? Because I think our next question was a lead to kind of like the question of this whole metaverse, and are there enough people coming? Is enough traffic coming to these spaces? Like, okay, we talk about the metaverse next great thing, but is anyone actually there? Because I've been to some spaces and there is a lot. There might be a couple.
Yeah.
That, but that's it. You know what I mean? Like, so.
But I mean, I think it's the same as anything else, right? Like, if you just stand in a field in the middle of Wyoming, you're gonna be like, "There's no people here. Are there no people on Earth?" Like, it's not, But if you have Coachella happening, like, there's gonna be a ton of people there, right? So I think it really depends on what's happening. There's a few things to consider. Like, Decentraland has over 500,000 monthly active users, like people who pop up in Decentraland throughout different events and paradigms. Sandbox apparently has hit over 2 million users. I don't know how many are active. Spatial apparently also has almost, I think, like 400,000 active monthly users. So like, there are people using these platforms. There's millions of people using these platforms. I just think the time that we see this most is when there's an event or something happening. That's why these types of events, like Metaverse Fashion Week or like Pride or all these other things happening, this is when the most people come. So like, for instance, I did an event, a private event. This was private, not even publicly advertised. A private event for my BFF, that organization, on the rooftop of my Cash Labs gallery on June 1st, with Paris Hilton, and there was an avatar Paris Hilton DJing and doing a DJ set.
Right.
And 1,800 people showed up to the 1-hour event, and it was private. It was blasted out through an email list and a Discord. It was private, and over 1,800 people showed up. And I think they claimed like over 3,000 things were claimed from those 1,800 people.
Wow.
So it's like, there are people interacting, and it just depends for what and why and who. The same questions we would ask in physical space. So I think the cool thing is, we do have this. It's not there yet, wherever there is, right? We're not at full reality. We're not beyond reality. We're not at a point where, things are incredible in terms of like fidelity, let's say. But Decentraland is an amazing solution, and you can really do a lot within that space. And if you see fully built out areas, like if you went to Metaverse Fashion Week and watched the shows, like you would have, and if you have a computer that could watch it at full capacity, that's also the thing. If you have over like 32 gigabytes of RAM, you saw an amazing show that you would never, same as like seeing something on Fortnite. Like, it was really amazing quality. I think that in the next few years, as people, as technology continues to develop, and we see more things like what Elon's developing with Starlink and all these things, like, and people get better Wi-Fi and better devices, we're just going to see a totally new metaverse, and it's going to be way more accessible for people to enter. And also on that note, one last thing I want to mention in terms of people entering the metaverse. One thing I also want to say, and I talk about this a lot, so if you've heard this somewhere else, I'm sorry, but when we're talking about the metaverse, my response to every mother, every worried parent, everybody who says, this virtual world is taking us out of our physical world, and it's a detriment to our, lives, because, we already spend so much time on our phones. We already spend so much time on our screens. How are we going to go further? What I say is, I don't look at the metaverse as, replicating reality. We don't need to replicate reality. We have reality. It's here. It exists. What I think is exciting about the metaverse is the metaverse allows us to move beyond the confines of reality and do things that are not possible in our physical surroundings. So that can range from something physically impossible, like being able to fly, or having, I don't know, for instance, the Pride Parade that we're showing is going to loop for 24 hours for a month. If you had people doing that, they would die. Like, that's not humanly possible, right? So like, there's things that are like just fantastical that we can accomplish, or like being able to like have a house, on a volcano. I like, anything you can imagine is possible in the metaverse. But then also on a more practical level, I'd like to say, when we consider users and why people are joining the metaverse, why people are there, let's think about people in situations that are not, who don't live in major cultural hubs in major cities. What if I'm a trans person living in Saudi Arabia, and I don't feel comfortable exiting my home, as my authentic self? I can go in the metaverse, I can put on my avatar, I can be myself, and I can live authentically, you know, in virtual space. So for some people, it's a lot more practical than, you know, than we might think. And it's the same reason why, you know, the internet is important, you know, the same reason why, you know, the World Wide Web or telephones connected us further than they've been able to thus far, because now instead of having, you know, this disconnect via a virtual device, what I like to say when in the metaverse is we have a more tangible experience. We have an experience. It's not just, you know, it's not just a web interface that you are interfacing through. It is something that you're experiencing. And if you walk up to a person, even if it's an avatar, you're still walking up to that person's avatar. It's a much more direct and, I like to say, tangible experience in the metaverse. So anyway, that's my rant for
I like it, and I think it's important to say that and to highlight that about the metaverse, because you will get, whether it's mothers or whoever, talking about, well, this is going to take us away from the real world. We can't have.
And it's a valid concern. It's a valid concern. I get it.
I'd like to say that at the same time, we check the hours that they use on their phone and social media. It's probably within the 6 to 9 hours.
Yeah.
So
how many hours is that same mom on Facebook? Yeah, exactly.
So it's already happening. But yeah, that's another conversation. Okay, so I love that. I love that explanation. Another thing, we're talking a lot about fashion, which I think is interesting, and obviously the metaverse and whatnot. But I really think I've seen a lot of big brands kind of going in between, so they're bringing it into having physical fashion that's linked into NFTs also, which I really think is interesting. So for example, I know that you're probably connected to through Clubhouse's Zoe in to high-end fashion and displaying the NFTs. Also you've got Gambit, which is obviously the NFT jeweler. So these physical items that people can actually wear and showcase their NFTs. What's your thoughts about that? Is that going to be the adoption for mass, like, in order for people to join the space and to buy these NFTs to showcase them?
Yeah, I mean, I do definitely think so. So there's a few things worth mentioning here. There's the idea of the digital twin. There's the idea of digital. And then there's the idea of, you know, ideas, I guess, concepts beyond that. So like digital twins, I think, are a reality already today. You know, I have, during Metaverse Fashion Week, I've gone to a kiosk in Decentraland or a Metaverse solution. I've clicked, I've bought, and that item is a wearable in my wallet, but it's also an item that was shipped to my house. And I have a few things like that that I've seen, and it works. It's cool. It's a great use case of people selling items in the metaverse. Also, you know, similarly, if you bought a physical item, it could come with a QR code, which allows you to claim an NFT wearable version of it. That's dope. But I think it's a quite simple, you know, embodiment of it. I think we're going to see a lot of it. You know, I think that's the most general, you know, example, let's say, use case of phygital fashion. Then we talk about phygital as a broader component. What does that mean? You know, digital and physical combined. So there's a lot of use cases of this. You know, we've seen, you know, for one very, you know, popular, very general use case is the ability to buy physical fashion with crypto, because it's not quite an NFT, but you're still, you know, integrating this digital component into the physical buying experience. We've seen a lot of, you know, I would even argue that sometimes when you buy a physical and it comes with a digital, it's not a twin. Sometimes there's just a pairing. You know, that physical item can come with an NFT, or it can come with, you know, a POAP or something. So there's also this like physical digital pairing, which we're seeing a lot of. You know, even companies like Diesel have done like components on their clothes where if you scan it with an app, you know, it'll, but you know, we see more of this happening in Web3. And then beyond that, I think we're starting to see more and more exciting examples. You mentioned a few Clubhouse friends. I think Zoe's doing lovely things, but also I think Francine from MetaGolden is doing some really cool work where, you know, you'll see, you know, a physical piece of jewelry linked to like a really absurdist digital piece of jewelry. And it's not really something you can necessarily wear, but maybe it comes with a digital wearable. So you'll have like this 3D piece of art, you'll have a piece of jewelry, and you'll have a wearable. So I think people trying to push it further and do more are doing cool things. I think what DressX is doing specifically, also to speak about something I work with quite personally, you know, DressX, when you buy something in their meta closet, you know, they try to give you as many options in terms of wearability as possible. So, you know, you'll have you know, the ability to wear it on Decentraland, on Sandbox, etc. And there's a bunch of people trying to push for this. Also, another person I work with who I think is amazing is Dark Blocks. You know, there's solutions now even outside of the direct virtual fashion realm where, you know, people are creating interfaces where you can either bundle NFTs or token gate NFTs. So, you know, somebody could use Dark Blocks to make one virtual fashion or make one NFT the accessibility token for, you know, every metaverse. So we're definitely already seeing solutions pop up, and I'd highly recommend, you know, if you're a virtual fashion blocks, check out DressX, you know, check out the people who are already kind of innovating and pushing things forwards. But solutions are being created. And I think that, you know, once those solutions are normalized, we'll start to see interoperability becoming a more regular thing within the space. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I feel like I got on a little bit of a tangent there.
I liked it. If you're just giving your answer, I like you just to spill, because I think it's so valuable for people listening. You're like, because you're working with so many different people, different areas, your experience, obviously from in the real world, from before NFTs to now. Like, it's just a splur of creativity and what the future may look like and what's going on. So it's important for you to speak. So I'll just, while you're speaking, I'll just let you go and add that. But this, before I want to kind of tap into like another industry. Like, is there any other industries that we're not talking about digital fashion? We talked about the metaverse. Like, other industries I think that are gonna like really explode over the next few months, like music or real estate or even health, and stuff like that, or ticketing, entertainment.
I think that I think there is a use case for every industry in the metaverse. Essentially, from my perspective, the way that I like people to think about NFTs is just a means of transacting things on the blockchain. It's not an internet of things, it's just how we transact things on the blockchain, right? It's as simple as that. If you want to sell something and sell it with crypto, it's better to sell it as an NFT than to just sell it with crypto, because you have it tracked and it's all on chain. It saves you a bunch of steps in this process and saves a bunch of middlemen, saves you paying an additional hosting fee for a traditional website. So I like NFTs just as a tech. I think that, obviously the art world embraced it for the most part. First, I think we're going to still see things pushed a lot further because, we have Decentraland Art Week coming up in August. Even organizations like Sotheby's and Christie's, who've done a lot in the NFT space, still have a lot to do, to push forward to actually be Web3 enabled platforms. I don't know if anybody here has tried to buy an NFT on Sotheby's, but it's not so easy. I love them. I've worked with them, but it's not so easy. So, improving the ability, integrating Web3 functionalities directly into websites, I think it's going to be something that's going to be, normalized across industries, especially fashion and art and these kinds of like early trailblazer industries. But to your point, healthcare for healthcare and mental health, and education, those three, I would say. I think their biggest potential there is in the metaverse, in making those types of, opportunities more accessible to people. So I think that's a really obvious use case to me. But then also in terms of industries that I think are immediately next, I think that and I've said this for a while, any industry that involves big ticket sales, so real estate and automotive, I think are really obvious use cases that I'm definitely seeing a lot more of already. I can mention this depending on when this podcast is coming out, but Renault, which is an amazing car brand, is about to be putting out a ton of NFTs over the next year. Acura has already put out a bunch of NFTs. So, we're starting to see, and it makes a lot of sense because if you're selling something for $50,000, it makes sense to create a whole digital experience around it because let's be real, we're not paying cash anymore. Transactions are digital. So if you can make that experience, if you can turn that digital transaction into an experience, why wouldn't you? If they can buy it in the metaverse, or if they can get some kind of digital component or digital interface or app or something on top of buying that car, why would you not give that to your consumer? It's just added value. So I do see a lot of brands taking major steps forwards into virtual spaces. And I think that real estate and automotive, I think, are very much next because they're high ticket sales. It makes perfect sense. Do you want to give somebody $1 million of cash, or do you want to send them that in Bitcoin as a transaction on the blockchain safely? Or Ethereum,
David, there's also value for the as a company too, in it, in regards to potentially royalties aspect of it.
In perpetuity, if you were one real estate agent, you could get a 1% fee forever. It would be great.
Exactly. And then also, like when we talked about automotive cars and whatnot, just being the value of knowing what kind of people have bought your cars. That because once someone buys it from the where they buy it from, what's the place called now? What would you call it? Slip my mind. Where would you buy a car?
Like a car store, like an automotive shop.
Slip my mind, but you buy it from there, and then they have no recognition where that goes and what's happened with that car after that. But as an NFT, you're able to track where it goes.
Absolutely. Also for fashion, I mean, for non-virtual fashion, for physical fashion, that was one of the first things that made sense to me from that first conversation that we touched on. People were talking about, if Gucci has a consumer. Or if better example, if they sell a pair of pants, they sell 1,000 of those pants. If it's an NFT, they can track forever where those pants go. And if 30 years from now, they're in some vintage market and they want to find them, they could contact that seller and be like, hey, we want to buy them back for our archives. And they could. It would be so difficult. Actually, like this is a very niche example, but heritage brands do spend a ton of time and money into sourcing their own archives, which sounds crazy, but like that's a fashion industry specific example. I know in Italy, there's a whole industry of people who will literally just go to vintage markets and try to find like in great quality archive pieces for brands like Gucci, Ferragamo, Prada, because they don't have them. They don't have them in their factory. It's crazy. And I know like there's this store called Angelo Vintage in Italy. I know specifically. And these brands will go there to inspect their own garments from like 100 years ago or 50 years ago. So it's really something to be said. And the same goes for cars. It's the more user data, the better. And this is user data that the user has decided to give to you. So it's way more powerful.
I love that. A bit more about yourself before we wrap it up, because I know we're short for time. NFTs. Is anyone that NFTs that you collect yourself, whether it's art or fashion or anything else, like you can talk about that?
Too fucking many.
Maybe I have like one to keep two. Just talk about two. Just talk.
Yeah, I mean, I've collected a lot. I have hundreds of NFTs. I have over 200 virtual wearables, most of them specifically for Decentraland. So I have a lot. I have a lot of Decentraland wearables. I love Decentraland wearables. If I can mention maybe one of the best people I think are making Decentraland wearables, I think it's there's a few, but Roe. He runs a brand called Placebo Digital Fashion House, and they make some next level virtual fashion wearables. If you saw some pictures of my avatar on Twitter or in like magazines and stuff, it's probably in one of his wearables because he makes some crazy stuff. I've recently bought a couple pieces from two collections I can mention also because it's Pride Month. I bought two pieces from Jason Ebeyer, who's an amazing 3D artist. He did a collection called Them, highlighting non-binary PFP figures. So my current PFP on Twitter, if you want to check it out, is a piece from Them. And then I also just bought two pieces from Mike Ruiz's latest collection called Leathermen, which is a series of 100 one-of-one photo portraits of members of the leather community from all different backgrounds. So like when you think of Leatherman, you think like old straight white guy or like old white guy. And when you actually see like the collection, it's crazy. There's drag queens, there's women, there's people from every background, every ethnicity, differently abled. Like it's a really well done collection, I think. And I'll highlight those two since it's June.
Okay, perfect. And just to round it off, like a question I asked to all my guests, and I think I'm really going to get an interesting answer from yourself now, is I want you to imagine 10 years from now, want you to describe a morning, you wake up in the morning, what does your morning look like involving the metaverse and NFTs? Like from you wait, the alarm goes off and then you go.
No, I mean, that's a great question. So, I mean, I would, in 10 years, I don't know if I'm going to be doing anything like what I'm doing right now. I think we're going to be a totally different realm. I definitely see me waking up in the morning, being able to like click the air, have a glass of water, pour, getting out of bed, being able to like click and like initiate morning meditation yoga sequence. And like without removing my glasses, just like everything just like appears around me. And I have like a yoga coach like work me through like a morning routine. And then I have a different person I swipe, and then a different meditation person comes and leads me through a guided meditation, all just through my glasses, not having to put on a headset or anything. And then I could go, I could be like, finish meditation, click, I'd like to order food, order my food, just kind of like, maybe I go to the fridge and I go, oh, we don't have this. I click, I order it. It orders automatically to come to my door. I can click a little thing that'll buzz my boyfriend awake. I think that basically to suffice to say, I really do see the very near future being mixed reality. I use VR a lot right now, and I use metaverse solutions a lot right now because they're what exist. But I definitely think that us familiarizing ourselves with these things is us working towards the very near mixed reality future that we're going to live in, where, this metaverse space is going to be in parallel to our immediate surroundings, and that we're going to be able to interface with it. And I'm really excited for that because I don't know about you, but I get crazy fatigue with my eyes being on my phone and my laptop all day. I would much rather be able to do it in a fully immersive environment, just be able to click the air. Since I saw that in like, I don't know, Iron Man and like some earlier space age movies, I've always wanted that. So I'm really, really excited for that to be a reality. And the moment it is, no matter how prohibitively expensive it is, I will buy it.
Now I love that. Like, it's pretty much, it rounds up your thoughts of everything you spoke about to how you see the future, where it could be. And I honestly believe that we can be there in 10 years. So I'm excited. But thank you.
I hope sooner, but 10 years is like my, like, I don't know, please within 10 years. Like,
I don't know, maybe 5 years if you're going to pay the price for it, baby.
Right.
But if I can use it, maybe 10 years or a bit longer than that. But yeah, I look forward to it. But I was going to say, like, Dave, thanks for coming on and sharing all the knowledge and talking about all the things you've done. You've been a great contributor to the space, and obviously you're still contributing. So I look forward to seeing all the amazing work and all the things that you're a part of in regards to building the future for Web3. Where can the people find you if they want to connect with obviously yourself or Cash Labs? where can they find you?
Oh, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. You can find me on pretty much all social media at DavidCash888. That's my Twitter. That's my Instagram. I believe my LinkedIn's different, but if you search David Cash, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Cash Labs as well. If you search Cash Labs on LinkedIn, you'll find it there. And on Instagram, it's at cashlabs.io. And on Twitter, it's cashlabs_, because I can't do .io on Twitter for some reason. We'll figure out a fix for that at some point. But yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. So much value, man. So I hope everyone enjoyed watching and listening. Everyone stay listening and stay blessed.